Hi, this is Trevor Conquergood. Welcome to this week's R&K Software Club's video for the week. And the topic for this week is how to create your own embroidered postcard. And to get you started, we've included some new designs in the latest exclusive member designs from the R&K Software Club. In other words, if you've downloaded the latest free monthly designs, you can visit and on the right of your software, click on Library, where you'll find your free monthly designs and just expand the month of December and look in the category or the, topic for December 2021. And once you've selected that, then you hover over the tab that says Designs. So it's kind of like you point the library and then you go over the Designs tab to see all the designs. And so notice in here that there's a cool postcard. This is meant to be like the back of the postcard, and the little snowman is meant to be the front of the postcard. And so those are embroidery designs that were meant to sew on paper. That said, you can absolutely sew them on fabric. It's not like it has to be sewn on paper, but they are outline style embroidery, so that if you do it on paper, or fabric, you can color them in with your markers or with pencils or even paints. And so it's kind of a fun project. And so I wanted to go over, first of all, where to find the designs. So visit your library, December 2021, and then where to find the designs. Now notice that yes, I've created the back of the postcard and the front of the postcard and put a little box around it. The box is just artwork, so it's not going to actually stitch that box unless you want it stitched, in which case, you could select that shape just for that artwork and convert it into a run stitch, but I didn't. I just put them there so that you could see how the shape of the postcard could be. And I kind of measured a standard postcard, so that's what size those boxes are. And notice how I kind of put them side by side, but then I flipped the postcard so that you would fold the paper here. So you'll notice here, I'm just going to start a new empty workspace. That in the same folder, I also included the Happy Holidays postcard in a 9-inch size. So that's a little bit larger than a standard postcard, but if you don't mind putting an extra stamp on it, this one will go just fine. And so I thought I'd show you guys how I make these. And first of all, how easy it would be for you to select and change it. If you didn't want to do a snowman that says Happy Holidays, maybe you want to put Happy Hanukkah, you could do that too. Or you could absolutely just totally get rid of all of that and put your own, design in the center. And so whenever you bring something in from the library, it's going to be all group together. And if you want to make changes, you're going to need to click on the ungroup tool and then click off. And now the design should be more segmented, and so it won't be like the snowman is all one thing. In fact, it'll be like the pieces of the snowman as they were digitized. And so one way to select all that stuff is, of course, to click and drag just the perfect box. But notice if you get too close to things, you start picking up stuff you didn't mean. Here, click undo, and there's a piece there that I haven't explained yet, and that's why. But what I'm trying to say is there's more than one way to select, and yes, you can click and drag like this to select things, but notice that you're getting more than maybe what you wanted. So if you don't, you can use the lasso. So instead of doing like a rectangle, you can click on it as a lasso. And now remember that whenever you do a lasso, it's only the things that are 100% selected in your lasso. So if you're not wanting to pick up like the box, for example, or the little corner pieces that I haven't explained yet, you don't go around them. You can touch them, just don't go 100% around them. So I right click to stop drawing the lasso. And now I got, just the beginning, the inside part of maybe you want to just hit delete and then go shopping for another design to put in there, right? I bet you if you look through the, previous years and years of designs, you could find all kinds of cool things that could be put onto a design. And I'll talk more about that at the end too, about some of the other things. But I want to explain about embroidering on paper, because if you're going to actually make a postcard, and so I made some photographs of me making one, and I thought I would just quickly go through it, and then if I go too fast, well, you can watch the video again. Notice that I've hooped up my favorite stabilizer for making postcards, and it's specifically Floriani Cutaway Medium Fusible. And it needs to be the fusible kind, but you don't fuse it first. You're going to fuse it after you've completed the embroidery, but it needs to be fusible, and you need to hoop it with the shiny side facing up towards the paper, because we do want to fuse this paper to the stabilizer at a later time to ensure that they always stay bonded together, because we're going to need to use an adhesive, because remember, the card, we're sewing the front and the back of the card all on one piece of paper. And so notice that I've used the paper is watercolor paper, and I've used a little bit of the pink embroidery perfection tape to just hold it in place and make sure that it's centered in my hoop. I'm using, kind of like a larger size hoop, and that's a 10 by 14 piece of paper. You can buy a pad. This is the best kind of paper to use, is watercolor paper. A lot of people think cardstock because it's thicker, but it's also very, watercolor paper has more fiber than your regular tree-made paper, because watercolor paper is made from cotton. And so get watercolor paper, just buy a pad of it at like Walmart, or go to the art supply store where the painters buy their art supplies. They'll have beautiful papers there. You can buy it in sheets, you can buy it in rolls. I usually buy it on a pad, and I just pull off a page. That's a page off of a pad of paper, and I tape it on top of my cutaway stabilizer, and then I embroider on it. Simple as that. Now that it's embroidered on and you've finished your design, and I do want to point out the little triangle. Remember in the design I said, I haven't explained that yet. Well, there are little alignment marks built into this postcard design to help you to make the postcard. And they're meant to be there. I actually just take the thread right out of the needle and sew with the needle with no thread in it. You could have thread in that little T if you wanted to. It wouldn't harm it. I just figure I don't need, they're really just marks to help me with folding. There's two across the sort of top of the card, and there's another two sort of marking the bottom of the card and the bottom of the back and the front of the card. And so essentially I sew the design, if you look in the Floriani software, is two colors. So forget the Christmas tree here. Let's click undo and go back to this is what the design was. And just notice that its color 1 is all of the embroidery. And then color 2 are these alignment marks. And those little alignment marks are what made those little holes. So like I said, if you want to take the thread out of the needle, you need to know how to tell your machine that there's no thread in the needle, and that's okay. Otherwise it thinks there's a thread break. And so on my machine, it's simply a setting in the settings menu where I can turn off the thread sensor for the, upper and bob and thread sensors. Anyway, so you stitch on the paper and then you remove it from the embroidery hoop. All right, now let's see if I got there we are. And you trim all of the excess stabilizer around the paper. Don't trim to those alignment marks yet. That comes later, okay? You just want to trim the excess stabilizer, because the next thing I'm going to do is fuse this, because currently the paper and the stabilizer are matching in shape because I've trimmed them to be exactly the same size. And now I'm going to put an iron to it, because remember I said to use a fusible stabilizer. That way you can fuse the stabilizer together to the paper and they become perfectly married together. You want to use a hot temperature iron with a little bit of pressure and time. If you have a heat press, that's way better for the paper because you can do it in like 1 or 2 presses. But if you have a hand iron, then you just don't want to press too hard when you're ironing. You don't iron it like you do your clothes. You kind of move it around and press, but don't push too hard or you might dent the paper, I guess is the reason. That's the one reason why a nice larger sort of heat press kind of does work nicer. But either way, you can totally get the stabilizer fused to the paper. Just use a hot iron and about 10 seconds of time when you're ironing and or pressing, and it'll permanently bond the two together. And so now we want to fold our card. And so we use those little alignment marks that we stitched, and what we do is we work from the inside of the card. So this is the inside of the card, and I've got the RNK turning tool to help me do it. Notice I'm using my Quilter Select rotary mat, or like mat and rotary cutter and rulers, and I put a ruler right across from the two, I guess, alignment marks, and then I use this little tool to make a score. See how it has a nice little ballpoint end on the end of that tool, and you just run along the edge of the ruler, and it gives you a nice crease to start your fold of your paper. That way you're not worried about how you fold the paper. You know that you've got it kind of like perfectly balanced and square, so that the lettering and everything in the actual card is always, perfectly balanced, because it was designed that way in the first place. Let's put this back together. And so you know that if you fold along this line, that Happy Holidays and the postcard are going to be properly square and balanced, and that's the point of doing all this. So now that you've kind of dug a groove there, you fold it. You can fold. I usually just fold right against the ruler until it's kind of folded over. Then I slip the ruler out and I fold with my finger along that edge to get a nice crease. You can also use the sort of barrel end of this tool. It's got like an octagonal shape to it, and it's nice for doing the flattening of your card. So now you've got your card sort of folded front to back, and it's time to glue it together. And so that's what I was saying about the octagonal barrel. So now you've got another product to use. I like the So Much Cosplay Mighty Fuse. You might have some Floriani Press and Bond in your stash. Either of those products work. Both of those products come on like a waxy paper, and they're basically an adhesive that is like you fuse it onto something, and then you fuse it, you remove the waxy paper, and you can fuse again. In this case, we're going to use this to fuse the front of the card to the back. And so what we do is we unroll the product and we trim a piece to match this, one half of the card. And you need to have a good straight edge and get it right to the fold of your card, so that it's, the card doesn't have kind of like a little spot at the top where it's not glued together. So get the product right up to that sort of line, fold the Colt card right over it, and then trim all the excess. And you trim the excess so you don't get it on the iron. Same thing when we trimmed off the excess stabilizer in the first step. We do that so that when you press it, you don't get glue onto the iron or even on a Teflon pressing sheet, which is never a bad idea to use on a project like this, some kind of a Teflon sheet to protect your iron, because there are a lot of different adhesives and different layers. Anyway, what I'm saying is trim. Don't trim to the alignment marks. Still not time to do that. Just trim the excess of the Mighty Fuse. And once it's all trimmed, you take it and you iron it. And so now it's like off of the iron, and you can kind of sense that there's Mighty Fuse has been pressed on this right-hand side, and the left-hand side has none. And what you now need to do is peel off that waxy paper. And see how it just peels back. And once it's all off, you'll have kind of like a bit of a gluey side. It's not glue like sticky glue. It's cool, and it's basically fusible adhesive. So what you do is you close the card up and you put the iron to it one last time. And this time you hold it again for 10 seconds with a hot iron, and it will permanently bond the front of that card to the back. And now all we have left to do is to trim, and we still have our alignment marks. Can you see them on the paper there? The alignment marks are still there. And so what we do is we use, again, the rotary cutter, and we just make sure that you keep the ruler horizontal with the top of the card, because that was the folded edge. And so you don't have to trim that edge, but you trim the other three sides. And if you do this side, the right and left side, with the ruler perfectly parallel to the top of the card, you'll know that it will be all square when you're all said and done. In the final cut, see there's how the two little alignment marks at the top of the card where we had folded it are now your sort of guideline to where to trim your card, so that it's equal space on either side of the embroidery. It all balances, and you trim your third side off, and you made a postcard. And it's completely embroidery on the front, embroidery on the back, and yet it looks like it's all one piece of paper. And how'd you do that? And now comes the fun part. This is my favorite part. You can color it, because of course it's paper. You could paint it with watercolor paints. You could use colored pencils, colored markers, anything you want. Or maybe you send the postcard to the family and then they get to color it. I guess that would be optional, but somebody should color it because it's a lot of fun. If you've forgotten how much fun coloring is, I'm here to remind you guys. So make a postcard, give it a try. Notice how it looks like it's just one completely sort of perfect piece of paper, and yet there's embroidery on both sides. And so, yeah, there's your inspiration for your next, I guess, Christmas postcard, you guys. It says Happy Holidays, postcard on the back. Now, I will say that I kind of maximized the size of the embroidery on the back, so I guess the stamp goes here. I do have, and I will point out, if you look back in the software, and we look under the library for December 2019. In December 2019, I shared another postcard, and that postcard had a different front and back. And so, and this one, I kind of actually put a little space where it said stamp, and it kind of had a little kind of run stitch little graphic that said postcard. Anyway, so there's 2 postcard blanks. And of course, I showed you how you can easily select the parts of the front of your card and like delete them and put your own cards together. And so if you want to give it a try, I hope you have great success, and we'd love to see your pictures if you make a postcard. This was from a design from February 2020, if I'm not mistaken. That design, that was the one from December 2019. That was the first time I shared a postcard with you guys, and you got your latest one. This is a design that was just part of the club for March 2021, but I put it on paper. So what I'm telling you is pretty much any style of embroidery can work because of the cutaway stabilizer and the nice sort of fibrous watercolor paper. You can even do satin stitches and fill stitches on the card. I will point out that if you do satin stitches, the density doesn't need to be reduced. However, it will look a little bit kind of choppy like this, and that is because of the way that the paper does not self-heal. And so what happens is 1 or 2 stitches will fall into the same hole before the needle has moved, far enough to make kind of a new hole. And so satin stitches always kind of turn out a little bit sort of choppy like that, which is why I've done a lot of my stuff with mostly run stitch and just a little bit of satin stitch. But if you've got a design that has an area that's filled in, I'm pretty sure you'll be just fine with all of these steps and sewing on paper. And so, yeah, if you have great success, send us an email or just post it onto our Facebook page. We always love to hear from you guys and see what you do with your exclusive FTCU member designs. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video for today. But until next week, have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.